other Dr. Heather Rice.
I didn't even prompt her on that.
Maybe she's low on money.
Darn it, that strategy doesn't work in our house. But it's interesting that she would introduce me because the topic tonight is sleep. And it's a big deal in our current generations, and it's really changed a lot over the last probably 3 generations. We've really started to shift things quite dramatically. And so tonight I'm going to share with you some things, some strategies I used with her when she was little, as even just a baby, and how do we get babies to sleep better. But all the way up into, the reason I think it's poignant is that when I think of my sleep habits, I know that I have some family habits that I inherited that I had to figure out. And so I want you to see if you can start to recognize when we talk about this subject of sleep, it goes deep. When we talk about sleeping deeply, right, this whole issue, it's a very deep issue. And it affects our health in profound ways. And it's one of the least addressed issues with our health. We keep looking at either the symptoms all the way downstream, or we look at, well, it's about how I eat or how I think or how I move. And we forget about that important part about how we sleep. So tonight we're going to unpack this whole issue of sleep so that we can uncover what are the most important pieces that we need to be addressing and keeping in mind. So I've added some things, kind of not last minute, but just as I was putting this together, I really wanted to update it quite a bit. So I'm going to actually be referring to my notes to make sure I don't miss any of the important pieces as we go through this. So we're talking about sleep, and sleep is not a luxury. That's one of the most important concepts that we need to recognize. It's not a luxury. When we think about, oh, if I could just sleep in, no, that's a luxury. Got to get up early, got to keep going. Sleep is not a luxury. In fact, sleep trumps everything. Everything. And why is that? Because sleep is one of the most important things we can do for our brain. And our brain runs everything. So it's one of the most important things that we can do. And we used to just sleep naturally by default in the healthiest way possible. We just did it naturally. But there are so many factors that have come into play that we're not honoring that natural rhythm that we should be. So we're gonna look closely at this. And I will admit, this is one of my Achilles heel. This is one of my weak pieces that I need to also look at. And for me, when I recognize that I need to change a habit, my best way of doing that is to dive deep into the information about it. And that's what will change my belief about it, and that's what then motivates me to change my habit about it. So for me, it doesn't work to just say, this is how much sleep you need to get. I need to understand what's behind that. Why do I need to do that? And when I start to get the bigger picture and I dive deep, okay, now I know too much to not pay really close attention to my sleep. And even though I know too much, it's still a very difficult piece for me. So I want to share what I've learned myself and how do I work, because I know you guys are going to struggle with this too. Everybody's going to be struggling with this, because even me that knows the best, right? And I even struggle with it. So why is it that we struggle with it? For me personally, and see if you recognize yourself in this, there's projects that I'm really passionate about that I want to just keep going with, right? And oh, I just want to get to this, finish this piece with it. Or no, I don't want to stop now. And that whole adage of you can sleep when you die, right? I used to play that game, right? And that what it means, the reality of it is we get fewer years to live out, and we die sooner if we don't honor our sleep rhythms. So, passion about projects, or maybe demands on me that I maybe don't feel like I have as much choice about. Family demands, running a business demands, or commitments that I've made. And my high level of integrity is I said I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it. And then the house is a mess, and I got to get the house clean, and I got to cook nutritious food, and right? And you can add to your own list, but we have all these demands on us, don't we? And so often, sleep is the expense of that. So we need to first really look at sleep as such a valuable thing that we need to really put energy into. And, so often we could buy nutritional supplements to take if we don't have the right diet, right? We could hire someone to clean the house for us or the yard work that we need to get done, right? We can't pay somebody to sleep for us, right? Like, for all of my patients, when I think about all the things that they need to do, if I could do it for you, I would be doing it for you. That's my level of what I want to see as far as change goes with my patients. But I can't do this one for you, right? So we have to learn what we need to learn to make the changes in our own individual lifestyles. And it starts with that awareness. That's where it starts. So that's where we're going to start as well. And when I think of this idea of learning what we need to learn, sometimes people wait until a wake-up call happens, right? And sometimes it's a harsh wake-up call before you're ready to make the change. And I want to create the pivot point for folks before that has to happen. My daughter, when she was born, we had this wonderful midwife, and she was so devoted and just gave everything to that process. And I'm so grateful that she was a midwife for us. And she ended up coming down with a very aggressive cancer. And she was one of the healthiest people that I knew, and as far as her lifestyle went. And so before she died, I had a conversation with her, like, why do you think this happened? Because it was so troubling to me that someone that looked like they were doing all the right things, and yet how is this possible that it affects somebody like that? And she said, I think it was because I couldn't get good sleep rhythms. I think that was my Achilles heel. That was the weakness in her system that was the cause of it. And it really made an impression on me, because that many years ago it wasn't on the front burner the way it is now today of what we know about the importance of sleep. But she had identified that piece. So I don't want to wait for a harsh wake-up call for myself or my family or for anyone I know. So I want to create that pivot point first. And if I think back of my own childhood, I clearly remember when I was a kid, my mom going to her full-time job, coming home, and then she's helping to set up my dad's chiropractic office, and there she is typing away into the night. Like, I have that model in my family of, you just keep going, you just keep going. So we all need to just look at what do we already have imprinted in us as far as the social aspects of sleep. And then we're going to look at what does the research tell us is the best practices around that, so we can make those changes that we need to. And so if we think of these social aspects and what has changed over the years, just recognize, research tells us that before the light bulb showed up in our culture, the average person was sleeping 9 hours a night. 9 hours a night, the average person was sleeping. As soon as the light bulb came into regular practice, our sleep length changed to 8 hours a night. Like, the average was 8 hours a night now, just with the advent of the light bulb. And then since we've added technology into our lives, it's now 6 or 7 hours a night is the average that humans get, Americans specifically, right? So our lifestyles are being impacted even beyond just our own little nuances, our projects and so on. Our culture in and of itself is pushing us towards that level of chronic illness that can come from so many things, but our sleep is one of the biggest things that's being affected. And then that in turn is affecting our health. So if we do have great sleep on a consistent basis, not just every once in a while, these are the things that it benefits. It's anti-aging, it's anti-inflammatory, it prevents mood disorders and dementia, it promotes healthy BMI, body mass index, right? People that are concerned about their figure and their weight and their body image and the health associated with a healthy BMI, right? Good sleep actually supports that, right? You used to think you had to do the whole exercise thing to get that. And it turns out that good sleep is important for that as well. It protects against neurodegenerative disease, arthritis, cardioprotective, immunosupportive, anti-cancer, like my friend the midwife, and even prevents musculoskeletal injuries. Actually prevents injuries musculoskeletally. Who would have thought? But sleep is so important for all these reasons. Now, again, another piece that comes to mind is just recently I flew to California and back on a red eye, right? And so jet lag is another way. So many people are traveling a lot these days. Jet lag is another factor that can affect our sleep. You guys just did a long trip, right? So tonight I'm going to actually share with you my secrets for how do we manage even things like jet lag in the best way. All right, and so what I'm also going to cover, besides unpacking these social issues around sleep, is I'm going to look at 3 particular, what I call body signals, or specific conditions that people associate with sleep as a sleep disorder. First one is sleep apnea. So oftentimes I'll see people coming in with that as a concern. Something called thoracic outlet syndrome, which keeps you tossing and turning all night. And then the third one is restless leg syndrome, right? That wakes people up as well. So I'm going to show you what we know about that and how do we best address those concerns as well. All right, so those are the 3 special things we'll talk about. But first, let's look at this idea of when we have these bad habits that are in place and how they affect us and the body signals that start to show up. Let's just talk about when we start to name conditions, restless legs, sleep apnea. Those are all the signals that our body is giving us. If we're waking up, if we have insomnia, it's a signal that our body is giving us. It's trying to communicate to us about something that may be a bigger concern than just that symptom. So everybody's heard of this idea of the tip of the iceberg. And so often we try to outsmart the body by addressing that tip of the iceberg, or addressing the symptom. Like, don't we have a whole myriad of sleep aids that we can do? Like, you know, you go to your doctor and say, I'm not sleeping, and they're going to either just give you the downright slam you to sleep with this drug, or they're going to look at the anti-anxiety medication, or the antidepressant medication, or all of those medications as a way to outsmart the body. But what do we know is going to happen if we actually just chipped away at this iceberg? If we really just chipped away at that iceberg and got rid of that, and we came back a month later, what would we see? Do you know? This whole thing rises up. That's what happens to an iceberg if you just chip at the tip of it. So you now have a bigger problem now a month later than you did before. So if we recognize that body signals are our body's way of asking for help, I want to teach you what your body is trying to communicate to you so that you can start to pay attention and you can use it as information for yourself, so you can make the right decisions for yourself. So when we think of that idea of the iceberg, remember, it's telling you something about your behaviors, right? So the symptoms are there to tell you you may be moving away from health right now, all right? So check out this chart here. In this illness-wellness continuum, this is death, this is health, and in the middle is, right here you have sick, here you have not sick. So a lot of people in our culture are actually living in this not sick place, but not really tasting what true health is. And in any case, no matter where you are on this continuum, you're not standing still. You're going to be moving in one direction or the other. So my goal for everyone that comes into my practice is just get them moving towards health. Whatever direction they're heading right now, get them moving in this direction. If they're already up here, how do we get them moving further up here? If they're way down here, we got some momentum we have to overcome to push them in that direction. And oftentimes the symptoms are going to tell us in what direction we're heading. So it may be a wake-up call of, oh, I am now moving away from health. And so you can use insomnia or restless leg or sleep apnea as one of those signs of, I'm moving away from health right now. And what do I need to do about it? Instead of waiting, right, for that crisis to happen, where emergency procedures now have to be applied. So the symptoms tell us what direction we're heading. And we could even take it a step further to say that when the symptoms are worsened, it's often a sign that we have more inflammation happening in our body. And so it may be that something about our behavior has triggered or increased the inflammation in our body, and that's what's now pushing us in that direction we don't want to be moving in. And by the same token, if you start to feel better, it may be a sign that, oh, actually, what have I been doing lately that's been dropping inflammation? What behaviors have I been doing? So I want you to start to think about, when symptoms show up, of looking at it as a signal about your behavior. So you can actually be quite empowered in your health and in your daily lives of just using the body signals as a communication. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? So now I want to go over some ground rules here and some basic premises. So the first premise is, and this is just, we have to have this context. We have to be on the same page as I go through the rest of what I've learned. And so we're going to start here. So the first premise is that health is normal. Healthy is normal. that you were designed to be healthy, right? How do I know that? Because from the very beginning, we started with 2 half cells that you can't even see, joined together. 270 days later, we have an entire human being. From the very beginning, our cells were designed to be healthy. And they're always wanting to move towards health at any moment. So our bodies are healthy. We were designed to be healthy. Last weekend, I attended a conference all about the most recent things we know about genetics, right? And isn't it true that we keep hearing this conventional medical model wants to tie every disease to a certain gene, and then that's going to be the answer to it, right? And you know what I learned from the conference? No matter about how much of the detail that we've learned about the SNPs and the nuances of everyone's genetic makeup, what I learned was that 99.6% of us have the perfect genome to be able to express health as long as we have the right environment over a consistent amount of time. That it turns out that our genes don't actually have to be a mandate that we're going to die from a certain disease. It turns out we just need to figure out with even more nuance what are the right things that need to be going into the body, what are the things that need to not go into this body, and if we're doing those things, creating the right environment, then we literally can express that full potential of health that everybody wants. So that end of that scale, right? So I thought that was really fascinating, and it just helps me understand what are the pieces we need to get in place as an individual. That's what we need to look at. So our body signals can be the clue of what direction we need to head in. The second thing is that your body is smart. It's smart. It is intelligent. Every cell in your body has the intelligence that you need to express that full level of health. So if at any time you're not expressing health, then it means that there's only 2 things that are going to be the cause of that. It's going to be an interference of that full expression of health that's either going to come from a toxicity or a deficiency or both. So we simply need to recognize what are those toxicities or deficiencies, reconcile them, and then we see that people then can get back on expressing that full level of health that every cell in their body has the intelligence for. All right, the next premise is that that intelligence in your body is coursing across your nervous system, and that the nervous system is what that intelligence uses to organize and coordinate every function in the body. So the nervous system is the master system in the body that's controlling and coordinating every function from the moment that you are conceived, and the first system to develop in the embryo is the nervous system, all the way to your last breath. And it's through the nervous system that it allows our body to be healthy and to be healing. And so as long as the nervous system is clear and healthy, then you get to be healthy. And so then the next concept is, what if there is interference in the nervous system? Then that's what can start to rob us of our health. So your spine is your suit of armor. Your spine is your lifeline of all the messaging running between the brain and the cells. So we're going to look very closely at that in a very particular way. We're going to look at the map of the nervous system and how does that relate to these very specific health concerns. Okay, and then finally, let's also recognize that modern life is unnaturally stressful. All right, so if we think of this idea of the stress that we have, let me just ask you, are we living in an unnaturally stressful world today? People recognize that, right? If you think of the 3,700 previous generations we had before us of successful human beings, we've got a lineage of successful human beings that have brought us to where we are right now. We look back through all those generations, we were doing something right, because we wouldn't be here right now if we didn't have that successful genome that we've inherited. So if we look back at the way our ancestors lived, that's the way our genes were designed to be that's the environment our genes were designed to thrive in, right? So if we look at that past, or that environment, and back all those generations, what we recognize is the last 3 generations is where we've really screwed up our lifestyle. We couldn't have created a more perfect scenario of interfering with our healthy expression than what we've done in the last 3 generations. So what do I mean by that? There are 3 categories that we need to look at. So there's 3 dimensions of stresses that we're being exposed to. So let's look at this idea of traumas, right? And there's macro traumas and micro traumas, right? So there's the car accidents and the sports injuries, that sort of thing. But then there's the micro traumas of sedentary lifestyle. So think about how sedentary our lifestyles are compared to when we look at our ancestors. Our ancestors, genetically, we were designed to move. In fact, if we weren't moving, we needed to move to eat, right? If we weren't moving, not only were we not eating, we were being eaten, right? We are not designed to be sedentary, but we have engineered a sedentary lifestyle into our culture. And so that's a physical stress to us at the cellular level. Our cells were designed to move, and here we are not moving. So that's a stress on us in and of itself. And then we look at toxins. Okay. The majority of the conventional food out there 200 years ago would not even be called food, right? Everybody get what I mean by that? We all agree on that? Like, we are exposed to the highest level of chemical stress on record that human beings have ever had. And if you look at every other species on the planet, we don't see the level of chronic illness that we see in our species. So at one point in time, we were the species that could go anywhere on the planet and settle in and thrive. We could figure it out and we would thrive. We were the super species on the planet at one point. Now, we're the sickest species on the planet. And we have that chronic illness. Now, if we identified that there was another species, that this species was starting to get sick and getting some chronic illnesses, what's the first thing we would do? What would we do? We would look at what's happened to their habitat, right? How did we screw up their habitat? And then we'd fix that, and what would we see? Oh, they came back to health. What's going on that we're not even treating ourselves the way we treat other species on the planet, at least if we're doing it in a conscious way and recognizing it, right? Yeah, and yet we just bumble along, right? And now it's all become normalized. We're not even noticing it anymore. We have people saying, like, I have patients coming in saying, yeah, I live a pretty healthy lifestyle, and they're just comparing themselves to other people around them and to what every commercial tells them is the healthy lifestyle that they should be leading, right? And what direction are they headed? Toward this chronic illness, right, to becoming a statistic. And what is it affecting? Their sleep is one of the things it's affecting. So toxins are a big stress for us. And then our thoughts. Look at our stress levels, right? Think about what your own stress levels were maybe 5 years ago compared to today. Not including if you're retired. if you're just kind of in your regular day-to-day, is your life more stressful this year than it was a few years ago? What do you think? Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. And if we look at, like, looking into the future, it might be even, I don't see any end in sight, right? The demand on us, right? We're expected to be even more productive than ever before, and yet studies show that we're actually getting less and less productive. Yeah, because we're getting more and more stressed. So it's these three dimensions of stress that we're exposed to. We are living in an unnaturally stressful world. And now let's look at sleep, right? Again, our ancestors, when the sun went down, time to sleep, right? When the sun comes up, time to get up. We had natural rhythms and cycles that we would sleep by default, and that was the healthy way to be. So our ancestors, without thinking about it, just by living by default, they were naturally healthy and expressing that full health of their genome. If we live by default in our culture today, we're on our way to becoming a statistic, right? Clearly. So there's got to be a better way. That we are living unnaturally, and especially with our sleep, right? Do you get it? Do you get it? This says it all, doesn't it? And, this is especially in the last 5 or 10 years that we have this as an added stress. Technology has become an added stress, and it literally is the straw that's breaking the camel's back around sleep. Is the technology. That's what all the research is showing us. And so we've completely abandoned the natural design, and now we're suffering the consequences of that. And the most common consequence is sleep issues. Okay, so let's take a look at this. There's a certain rhythm that we are designed to experience, and that rhythm goes with the light of the day. So there's a primal relationship that we have with light, with the sun, with the timing of our day and when we're going to eat, when we're going to sleep. We have a primal relationship to that. So if we look at this relationship, it really starts with light, and there's an organ deep inside our brain that actually is sensitive to light, to all kinds of light. So ideally it was designed, these organs, this pineal gland right back here was designed to respond to natural light, because that's all that there was. There was nothing else except natural light. So the design is that if we have that natural light, it's going to now affect things properly. So the pineal gland is going to then start to affect hormones in the body, and the pituitary is going to be affected, and the pituitary is the master gland for all the hormones in the body. So our hormones are what are then controlling so much of our functions. The pituitary is these are the pieces of the nervous system that then are controlling the hormonal or endocrine system. So the endocrine system is in charge of all of our organs. It also has a big influence on our liver and our kidneys. So our ability to detox and digest food and process hormones and clean our blood, all of those things are being affected by up here in the brain, which is then in turn being affected by our exposure to light. And so I want to show you what a natural rhythm looks like for a human being. This is what are known as the circadian rhythms in humans. So you have this midnight time, and then 2 a.m. is the deepest sleep. Your body temperature is lowest at this time, and then the sharpest blood pressure rise happens right around this time, right when the sun is rising. So our blood pressure goes up. Why? Because we are ready to meet the day, right? And then melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, right? That secretion stops right here because it's time to be awake. Our highest level of alertness happens in mid-morning. We go through noon. Our best coordination is happening at this time of the day. Our fastest reaction time. Our greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength is happening here, right? We're coming home from the kill. We've been out hunting and gathering through this part of the day. And then our blood pressure is at its highest here. Our body temperature is at our highest. And now melatonin starts to get secreted here. And the sun has gone down. So that pineal gland doesn't have the light stimulating anymore, so it starts to secrete the melatonin, and then we go into this deep sleep again. And it's a cycle, it's a rhythm. And it would be like this every day, day after day. This is the default rhythm that human beings are designed to thrive with. This is the default. And so if you see, we have this first half of the day here where we're active, and then we calm down and we sleep, right? But what happens in our culture? We wake up, we're active, and then right about here is the second half of our day, right? Then we just turn on and we get home from work, and now we have to do all the things at home that we're doing, right? So when we talk about like how much screen time we're using, it's not 40 hours a week if you've got a job in front of a monitor. No, it's actually 50 hours a week, because we go home, who's guilty of this? You go home from being in front of the screen, and you're in front of the screen even more at home, right? The second half of your day has started, right? Who's guilty of this, right? Right? We get it, right? That's why you guys are sitting here in this class, right? Exactly. So typically when the sun comes up, you get up. When the sun goes down, you go down. You go sleep, right? Climb into the cave with your mate, curl up, pitch dark, fast asleep. Get that rejuvenation that's supposed to happen when you're sleeping, ready to go when the sun comes up, right? That's the natural rhythm. And there's actually a rhythm to the hormones in our body that comes with that. So how many people have heard of cortisol? Have you heard about that, right? What do we think of cortisol as? Any ideas? What word comes to your mind with cortisol?
Stress.
Stress, that's right. So we think of cortisol as the stress hormone. Well, it kind of gets a bad name sometimes because it actually serves a really useful, important purpose. And if you look at this rhythm here, right, cortisol levels at midnight, they're at their lowest, middle of the night, deep sleep, and then at 6 a.m. they start to peak up, and that gets us going. We're ready to go out and hunt and gather. And then as we get the kill and we get the food going, we start to drop those cortisol levels because we want to be ready to be sleeping when it's time to go to sleep. And then this stays low, and then starts to go up just before it's time to get up to get us ready for our day. So cortisol is actually essential for us to be awake and moving and our muscles going and healing. It has actually an important purpose for us. All of that to keep us in our rhythm so we can do the things we need to do in our day. If you don't have cortisol during your day, you're flagging, right? You don't have the oomph that you need to actually just do normal things. But at the same token, if you've got cortisol running all the time, now that's going to be a problem because we need to have the rhythm to it for it to be healthy. And so sleep is very complex. It has stages that we go through. We actually have 4 to 5 stages of sleep that we cycle through every 90 minutes. And we have different things that are happening during sleep, during those cycles that we want to have happen in healthy sleep. So sleep is actually when the brain goes to the gym, right? During the day, we go to the gym, we work out for about 30 minutes. At night, we have this complex cycle where our brain is going to the gym. It's getting things done. It's sifting through all the activities and memories of the day and filing them away so we can access them at a later time. And so it gets very active at night, accomplishing important things. One thing that happens at night is our brain cells actually shrink so that the cerebrospinal fluid can flush through and clear out toxins. So they've found that people that don't have good sleep habits or have trouble sleeping, there's a high relationship to Alzheimer's with that. And what is we finding in Alzheimer's? We find debris built up in the brain. And it's one of the things they're finding is that their brain isn't shrinking when it's time to sleep, and they're not flushing the toxins out. So a lot happens when we're sleeping. Another important thing that happens is we have human growth hormone, HGH, which is strongly associated with anti-aging and repair of our cells, stimulates cellular repair, cell growth, cell generation, has profound benefits on our mood and our cognition, our understanding, our mental function, and that's because it directly affects the neuron health and our hormonal pathways. So sleep turns out to be the most powerful anti-aging cellular regenerator treatment in the world. It's free, right? How much money are people paying for anti-aging things when sleep is free? If we can get it to work, right? If we can get that sleep that we want and we need. So that growth hormone comes down and it affects our liver and our muscle growth and our bone growth. How important is bone growth for aging, right? It affects our immune system as well. All of those important factors, and that's just one of those hormones. Cortisol itself is so important for, it is stress hormone production, but it also downregulates melatonin. So it turns the melatonin off so that we can be alert and awake. It causes our blood pressure to increase. It downregulates our insulin sensitivity. So if we had to go fight a tiger, this is useful to have our blood pressure increased. If we have to go out, be on the hunt, we want to have lots of fuel. So our insulin being less sensitive means we get more insulin, we move more blood sugar into the tissues. But it does weaken connective tissue over time, and it does downregulate the immune system. Because if a tiger's chasing you and cortisol goes up high, well, that's not the time to spend a lot of energy on the immune system, so we're going to downregulate that until the tiger goes away. Except what's happening in our world? The tiger's there all the time, right? And so we're actually living in excuse me, an inflammatory state with swelling in our tissues. And it's happening ongoing. We're not coming out of it. Even all night long we have high cortisol levels. So instead of having that nice cycle during our day, we're ramping up the cortisol and it's just staying high throughout our whole day. And so no wonder when it's time to go to sleep, people are just lying there awake. So there are some important factors that are contributing to this elevated cortisol. And so the first thing is that one way to reboot our hormonal system, there's actually 2 ways to reboot our hormonal system. So if our cortisol levels are high, the way to reboot it is exertion, physical exertion, right? Think of our ancestors running, out gathering, right? Moving and exerting themselves so that by the time it was time to sleep, physically exhausted, ready to sleep, right? But in our culture, we're not doing the exertion piece. So we're hitting the hay. We're going to bed mentally exerted, emotionally exerted, but not physically exerted. So if we take that, and then we have chronic psychological stress, so we may crash and go to bed because we're exhausted mentally and emotionally, but then something wakes us up. Maybe it's our cortisol levels. The next thing you know, we're awake, and now we're stressed because all those things that stresses in the day are still there, and our mind is so active, and we haven't exerted ourselves physically to just be exhausted to go into a deep sleep. So that's the second part of it, is the chronic stress. And then we actually voluntarily are depriving ourselves of sleep, right? We're just staying up late. We're catching up with our email, right? We're watching that podcast, that webinar, right? We're surfing the internet. Or we're trying to get the housework done. Or we're reading that really good book, right? That you just can't put down, right? So we voluntarily are robbing ourselves of sleep. And when you put these three together, you have the perfect storm of the diseases that are then related to sleep deprivation. So it's a problem when we start to have these three happening together. So how does it affect our brain? When we have lack of sleep, it actually causes parts of your brain to slow or shut down completely. So things like memory and learning, difficulty learning new tasks, and managing or making novel connections, like brainstorming, getting that idea, that solution, nope, that gets turned off. Math and logic, slower thought processes, difficulty forming logical conclusions to problems, right? Our problem solving tanks. Creative thinking, lack of imagination or originality, lack of focus, stuttering, use of cliches in speech is a sign of that frontal lobe just tanking. And then finally, blurred vision and hallucinations can actually happen, and our language, our speech can be slurred. So these are the things that start to happen when we have a lack of sleep, sleep deprivation. It's a problem. And so what is it that's causing the sleep deprivation? So we have to look at these social aspects here, right? Our cortisol cycles get upset. Our melatonin is downregulated. That's the hormone that will induce sleep, right? That gets out of balance and goes sideways. And then our insulin sensitivity gets downregulated. So now we're flooded with blood sugar. Blood sugar's off. And when blood sugar's off, that oftentimes is waking people up. When I see people that go to sleep, but then they wake up in the middle of the night, oftentimes that's a blood sugar piece that's dysregulated. So we have to look at that as well. And then if we add to our unnatural schedules the unnatural lighting that shows up. So watch now, just watch this. If you were a bear and it's summertime, lots of light, that triggers you. It's time to start foraging and collecting and be fat saving. Let's accumulate fat during the summer. When there's lots of light, we're going to accumulate fat because we know that when the light goes away and it's time to hibernate, that's where we're going to switch into fat burning. Okay, can you get that? Okay, now watch. So the hormones that are involved with turning us into fat burning or fat saving, leptin gets downregulated. That actually makes our appetite go up. So leptin is the satiation hormone. When we're full, it's the one that's triggered that says, I'm full now, I don't need to eat anymore. So when that gets turned down, our appetite, we just keep having an appetite. And so when it's summertime, the bear's job is to eat as much as it can to pack on the fat. Ghrelin is the appetite trigger hormone, and that also goes up. So I'm just hungry all the time, right? Cortisol is associated with carb cravings because we want sugar fast to be able to power through and attack that tiger. And then insulin is the fat storage hormone. And so as that's doing its job, everything just helps us to pack on fat. Okay, so now watch, if we're in our natural rhythms and it's summertime and we don't turn any extra lights on, right, we're going to be probably more active in the summer, aren't we? So if we do, if all of this is happening because we have more light in the summer, we tend to be more active and, it doesn't affect us as much. But now it's the end of the day in the summer and we're still at the screen and we still have the lights on. And so our brain is saying, oh, still summertime. All right, now winter comes and we still have the same amount of light that we're exposed to. And so the brain is just saying, let's just keep packing it on because one of these days it's going to be dark and we're going to have to rely on that fat store and we're going to go into hibernation. But we never do. Isn't that fascinating? So the light, unnatural lighting that we're exposed to literally is affecting that whole metabolic syndrome that we see happening. It's affecting diabetes, obesity. It's one of the contributing factors. Got it. We got all of that. And so, watch what happens too. Where are we going to store that fat so it's most useful for us? Belly fat. So this is exactly what we'll see happening when people have trouble with sleeping, is they're going to pack it on in a tire right around here. Why is that? Why does that make sense? Because you can actually still hunt and run when you've got this belly here. It doesn't get in the way. And so it's a very smart place to put it, and then it's right there as a resource for when hibernation time comes, as that fat that we can then burn off. So belly fat is one of the things that our ancestors would have found useful, that we would pack on during the summertime, just like the bears would, right? There's still that intelligence that is there. So if you're stressed out all the time, what are we going to see? We're going to see this. So it's the unnatural light. It's just the high cortisol levels alone just keeps us at that go, go, go stage, and then we see the belly fat accumulating. So we see stress related to belly fat. All right, so the effects of sleep deprivation, right? Cognitively, we're going to be more irritable. We're not going to be able to think as clearly. Our memory's going to be impaired. Even our moral judgment can be impaired. Yawning all the time, even hallucinating. Symptoms similar to ADHD. It's going to affect our immune system. It's going to increase our risk of type 2 diabetes. It actually increases our risk of heart disease. It actually decreases our heart rate variability. So I stole this slide. I didn't make it, but it actually decreases heart rate variability and makes us less responsive to our environment, which puts us at higher risk of disease. It increases our reaction time is increased. Get ready to fight the tiger, but less accuracy, more tremors, more aches, and suppresses growth, higher risk of obesity. Our body temperature starts to get thrown off as well. And so what is it that is, all this sleep deprivation? Remember, what is it that's causing all this? Most of the time it's voluntary, or it's work demands, or it's think stresses, mental emotional stresses, all the demands, if you're a student, study commitments, and even just poor sleep habits. We just don't have good habits around sleep. And that's part of that voluntary thing. We're the one that's choosing that. We're doing that. So those are the most common causes. Sure, we also have people that have the sleep apnea, that have the restless leg, those things that are interfering. We have chemical things that are going on for people that are keeping them awake. So food choices, and we're going to look at all those pieces, some of what the research shows us. But if we do have sleep debt, now here's a myth. Some people think, as long as I can sleep in on Sunday, I'll catch up with my sleep. And I got bad news for you there, right? Sleep debt, you can't make up sleep debt with just sleeping in one day a week if you've not been getting good sleep all the other nights. And the research is showing us that 2 weeks of less than 6 hours sleep a night reduces your alertness and your performance to a level equivalent to missing an entire night of sleep. So if you think I can just get by with 6 hours a night for a couple of weeks, you're actually starting to already tank your system. And if you only have a week, if you have a week of only 4 hours of sleep a night, that's equivalent to 2 to 3 days without sleep. Yeah, so you can't just pace yourself out and then just try to make it up on one day. It doesn't work that. You can't erase sleep debt with just one good night of rest. So what are the best practices as far as the social aspects go? What do we need to be doing here? So again, just use the circadian rhythm as your guide. Just start paying attention to the sun. And what are the ways that we can just turn down our lifestyle? Just turn things down as it gets later in the day. So some people might even go to an extreme of, if they were camping, no lights, and then they get into that rhythm. So what would it be like to actually have an experiment where you don't turn any lights on? Just go without lights. See what that's like to just, it's dark now, what do we do? Time to go to sleep, right? And right now, we're looking at coming up on 12 hours of darkness and more, right? What would we do? Maybe we might have candle lights. Maybe that might be something you do, is just have candle lights. See what that's like. See what you can try to tune into your own rhythms that way. and start to look at really planning on 8 to 9 hours of sleep. So we use an alarm clock to wake ourselves up, to trigger us, it's time to wake up. Here's a novel idea. Let's use an alarm clock to tell us when it's time to go to sleep. Let's use an alarm, a signal, put it in our calendar, time to get ready for bed, right? Instead of, I'll go to sleep once I've finished everything I need to get done, right? Isn't that what we usually do? I just need to finish these last things, right? And there's a funny cartoon I've seen where it shows when men are ready to go to bed, they get up and they go to bed. When women are ready to go to bed, they get up and they putter around the kitchen, and they putter around the bedroom, and then they putter around here, they get the laundry going, make sure the dishwasher's going, right? And about an hour later is when they're finally actually going to sleep. Like, we do that, don't we, women? How many here are guilty, right? I'm guilty of that, right? So sometimes it's useful to actually use a device to give us the feedback, to actually measure what's really happening. Because sometimes we have this idea of, no, I'm getting up, I'm going to bed, it's 9 o'clock. And the man's going to go to bed at 9 o'clock. And the woman actually isn't going to go to bed until 10. But no, I was getting ready for bed at 9, right? So sometimes it's useful to use these new devices that we have that literally will measure whether you're moving or not when you're sleeping. It'll measure how restful and deep is your sleep. I'm not a big fan of wearing devices all the time on your body. I think that the research is still out on that, on how healthy that can be. But I think it could be useful, at least for a short period of time, to give you the feedback of what's really happening when you think you're sleeping. How good is your sleep? And how's your respiration and all of those kinds of things. So if that's what it takes for you to actually measure it, to change the habit, change the behavior, then it may be a good tool for you. Okay, what about the sleep environment? Okay, think of the cave now. Think of the cave, right? You go into that cave, no light, pitch dark, right? And remember that not only does our pineal gland pick up all kinds of light, if you have lights on in the room that you're trying to sleep in, any kind of light. So we're talking about alarm clock lights. We're talking about lights coming in through a crack of the curtain from street lights outside. That actually is still triggering your pineal gland to think, oh wait, it's it's daylight, or it's evening hasn't quite come yet, and so you won't get into that deepest rhythm. So you want it to be dark, quiet, and comfortable. One of the things around comfortable, people will get better sleep if the temperature in the room is lower. Like 60 degrees is actually around the ideal. I remember the first time I read that when I was studying about how to provide the best environment for my child, for my baby. And I said, oh, there's going to be a typo here. It says 60 degrees in the room. Shouldn't it be 70 degrees? No, actually it's supposed to be the best sleep is at 60 degrees, right? And that's for our bodies too. So a cooler room, we tend to get better sleep. Quiet is important. What if there's noise that's around? Maybe you need to use a white noise that you put into your environment to kind of cancel out other noises that there might be. Maybe playing some natural sounds might be what you need to do. Or maybe, if you have a partner that snores, earplugs are what you need just to get into that deep sleep. So dark, quiet, and comfortable. And by the way, light actually gets in through our skin. So just wearing an eye mask isn't enough if there's ambient light. So you really want to get those curtains that completely block out the light. You want to cover up any of those little lights that we now have on our technology everywhere. So you really have complete darkness. And anybody here wake up and they look at the clock to see what time is it that I'm now waking up in the middle of the night, right? Stop that. Stop looking at the clock, because then you start to oh no, I'm awake. And then you start to worry about, now I'm awake. So really the research shows, don't even look at the clock. Keep the room completely dark. Dark, quiet, and comfortable, just like the cave. Some essential oils that are really useful. Again, if you want to create that optimum environment for yourself, you could use a diffuser or put even a little dab underneath your nose of lavender, orange, chamomile, and sage. Those are the ones that are the most useful. There are more that are out there, but those are the ones the research shows that have the most powerful effect. All right, so an e-fast. That means a technology fast. That means no screens for at least 30 minutes before you go to bed. So none of this checking your email before you go to sleep in bed. No, stop that. At least 30 minutes of an electronics fast. No screens. That means no TVs, no computers, no iPhones, no iPads. Like, all of those things, stop, right? Turn them off. And even better, put them all on airplane mode so you don't have the signaling coming in all night long. Just get all that stress out of your system, including the electromagnetic stress as well. And so this other idea has shown up that's amazing. So it turns out that the blue light that comes from screens turns our melatonin off. The blue light is harmful if we have it sustained over time. And so a new biohack is using these lovely, beautiful safety glasses that you put on when the sun goes down. And it actually stops that blue light from getting in. And so guess what I have for all of you today? Your very own pair of safety glasses. And we have more coming in. Our order didn't arrive, so let's see if we have enough for everybody. One for you, one for you. And we'll get them to you if we have 4 left. I don't have 5 left. Oh, we have the perfect amount. One for you, one for you, one for you. And here's yours, and yours doesn't have a box, but maybe it does. We might have a box for it, but here's your pair. All right? So, okay, you might say they're goofy, but Paris has some fashions that we think are goofy in the beginning, and you are going to be surprised that you're going to start to see people wearing these, and you'll be wondering, like, what are those glasses? Except you're going to be in the know, and you're going to know what these are for. So I highly recommend that when you're home, or even if you're working late, like, I know we still have our demands, let's fess up. We still have those demands that are happening. So how many people here think they're really going to be able to go home and do the ideal thing right from the get-go? No, I know we still have the demands, and maybe we can pull it off, but if we can't, this is something that's going to be very helpful. And if it doesn't work over your glasses, you can actually order a pair online that fits over glasses better. So, and they're about $10. Yeah. Okay.
So you start wearing them when the sun goes down?
That's one idea. At the very least, when you're at a screen and the sun has gone down, at the very least, that's when you want to do it.
Okay.
If you're just kind of moving around your house and you've got low ambient light, maybe you don't need them. But I'll tell you, many people that have told me, and you're welcome to put them on right now if you want to, yeah? Many people have told me that when they first start using these, they're amazed at how they get really sleepy really early, right? My daughter, yeah. If you walk in our house tonight, we've got these on.
Also, to set like an alarm, or if you need to do something on your phone before you go to sleep, you put those on then.
Right, yeah. So that's what she was making that remark. Like, even, let's say you've done your 30-minute e-fast, and you're good, like you haven't had the screen, and then you remember, oh, I gotta set my alarm on my phone, or maybe I have to just see what's the weather gonna be like tomorrow, whatever it is. Like, put these on, because you don't want to ruin what you've just done of that 30 minutes that you actually were able to do it, right? Yeah, thank you, Steve. All right, so what else? Reducing alcohol and caffeine. Now, it turns out that alcohol, some people will have a glass of wine to help them sleep. It turns out that that will disrupt the beginning part of your sleep and the value you should be getting from that sleep. The human growth hormone that is secreted with the slow sleep waves, right? The alcohol will actually interfere with that. So if you are going to take in alcohol or caffeine, earlier in the day is a better strategy than later at night. Okay? So if you're going to drink earlier on. And some people want to know, well, alcohol also affects blood sugar. It turns out tequila is the one that affects blood sugar the least. So if you're looking for the healthiest alcohol, tequila, right, has the least effect on blood sugar. All right? And then there's this household culture. So how many people here, it's tricky when you're ready to go to bed and the rest of the house isn't ready to go to bed yet. Right? And so it actually is important to have that culture in the house of we're all turning the house down now. The house is going to sleep now, right? It's much easier if everybody's on the same page, right? Go into the cave with your mate, cuddle up, right? Nothing to do but just sleep and cuddle up. And by the way, sex is actually a really good way to help induce sleep. And the research shows the more sex, the better the sleep. So, okay, let's just take stock here. We're saying drink early, sleep more, have more sex. Yeah, I can do this, right? These are the healthy sleep practices that we want to start to put into place. But wait, there's more. So stay away from foods that disrupt sleep. So it may be caffeine, but you may also recognize there's certain foods for you that disrupt sleep. Sometimes people will have, chocolate to help them go to sleep, something like that. But for someone else, that's going to disrupt their sleep. So ideally what we find is you want your last meal to be a couple hours before sleep, or if you are going to eat, just eat very lightly if it's late. And instead of going after some of the sleep aid beverages that we might think of, a really good one is simple, using unsweetened almond milk. Warm it up a little bit, add a little bit of vanilla, the real vanilla, just a few drops of stevia, and that can actually really help to settle your body in and promote the melatonin, drop the cortisol levels. So if you feel like you need something to help you with that, that would be one of those pieces. Supplements that help you bridge the gap. So certainly those healthy sleep practices are going to be important, that healthy sleep hygiene. But if you're not there yet and you're trying to put them into place, but you still feel like you need some sort of natural sleep aid that's not going to have the harmful side effects of the medications, these are some ones that I've found have been very effective. We have a product called Setitol. It has magnolia and chamomile in it. People have been getting some great results with that. So that can be a good transition for you to just get good sleep, to start to get into a rhythm. For people that are worried and it's their thoughts that are keeping them awake, another product we find useful is Orchex. It helps to turn the stress switch off as well as in help to induce better sleep. If you're awake because of allergies or kind of a histamine kind of response, especially with sleep apnea, that kind of thing, it can be increased inflammation in the sinus tissues and the nasopharynx, then Antranex is a natural antihistamine that can be useful for folks. And then there's valerian, which, we've heard of Valium as a drug. Where did Valium come from? It came from the valerian plant. So just taking it as the herbal formula, the way it was originally intended to be used. California poppy can be useful. And then things like magnesium, tryptophan, right? Everybody recognize tryptophan is what's in turkey, which makes us sleepy after Thanksgiving. We've all heard about that, right? So tryptophan is one of the precursors for serotonin, which is kind of that feel-good, relaxed kind of hormone for our bodies. We've also found that omega-3s are so important for brain health, and if you have the optimum levels of omega-3s, then it helps your nervous system function so much better that it actually provides resilience when sleep deprivation happens, when you weren't planning it. It gives you much more resilience there. Remember we talked about how when you sleep, the brain cells will shrink to allow that flushing to occur? Well, there's some folks that have found that if you're not getting that good sleep, that if you add activated charcoal in the morning with a lot of water, it actually acts as a detox for your body, as another way of moving that detox through. So just to give you a boost if your body's not able to do that regularly because you're not getting the sleep that you need. So these are kind of bridging strategies to just help to get the body moving in the right direction. But wait, there's more. Again, we talked about the white noise or nature sounds or earplugs, so dealing with sound around sleep. And then making sure you do get vigorous exertion during the day so you literally are physically exhausted will help you to go into that deep sleep. But make sure you don't do that vigorous exertion no later than 4 hours before bedtime, because that actually could wake you up. So don't come home from work and then decide, yeah, I'm going to go work out now, and it's, after supper I'm going to go work out. That will tend to wake you up again. Now also, a technique that I've used very often over the years is called EFT tapping. How many people are familiar with EFT? A lot of you folks are. I actually have a YouTube video and on my website a link to a workshop I teach on EFT. It's called the tapping technique, and it literally is a way to turn the stress switch off within 30 seconds. So if there's something that your mind is just going on and on about, you do a little tapping thing and all of a sudden, it doesn't bother me anymore. in like 30 seconds. It's extraordinary. And I have used it for sleep with my daughter since she was so little. Like, oh, Mommy, I can't sleep. Okay, let's do a little tapping. We do the tapping. I leave the room, 5 minutes later, she's sound asleep. Yeah, it works so well, so well. So I highly recommend that as, again, a really great technique when stress is the piece that's keeping you awake. All right, jet lag. All right, so this is far up. So there was a chiropractor who also was trained in acupuncture and meridians. And so what he learned was that our organs will have a certain range of activity level, peak activity, different organs at different times. And there's literally, just like we have that circadian clock, right? You can actually place different organ systems all around that clock, and they're more active at certain times. And our body has these lines of meridians that go through it, and they relate to different organ systems. So here's what the strategy is. When you get on the plane, if you're going to be changing time zones, as soon as you get on the plane, you look at what time is it in the time zone that I'm going to. So if you get on the plane and it's 9 a.m., but it's noon where you're headed, then you're going to look on your chart for which organ system is active at noon, and you're going to find the point, and you're going to just stimulate that point, stimulate that point, stimulate that point, stimulate that point. And every 2 hours, it's a different organ system. So 2 hours later, you look at where's the next organ, and then you're going to stimulate that organ, stimulate, stimulate, stimulate. So that by the time you land, you've actually revved up the right organs to be active at the time that you are scheduled to, you know, the time zone you're scheduled to be in. And then you just do the reverse when you're coming back. And I promise you, it works. When I found out about this and I started to use it, I was amazed at how well it works. The other thing to do is when you arrive in that new time zone, did I give you that?
No.
Oh, darn it, wish I did. I try to remember everything, but anyway, it's on the, I have a link on the website to the site that takes you to where the map is. So if you go to the wellness resources on my website, it has all the different links to different places, and there's one for jet lag on there. So you just go to that website. I think it's called Jade Mountain, maybe, is the name of the website. And if you just did a Google search of Jade Mountain jet lag acupuncture points, and you know what, there's more out there now, but that's the one that I'm used to using. So if you search that, then you can get the chart and you'll know what to do. The other thing I find is useful is when you arrive in the new time zone, make sure you're active. Get some exertion in there so you actually get that physical exhaustion, and that's going to help you sleep. And if you have to, just to get tuned into that time zone, if you have to add a little boost to it, use a little chocolate to keep the blood flow stimulated. That'll keep you alert a little bit later. And then if it's time to sleep but you're awake, you can actually even use the melatonin. You can actually take melatonin. Now, I don't recommend using melatonin as a regular sleep aid because I really want the body to be able to produce that. But for situations like jet lag, I find it can be useful if simply doing the acupuncture points doesn't do it. All right. Excellent. So let's now look at these more particular sleep issues and see what the physical, chemical, and neurological aspects of these issues are. So first one, let's just go through our ground rules again. So remember, the brain is in charge of running everything in the body. It sends the messages down the spinal cord, central nervous system is here, out through the peripheral nervous system to all the organ systems. So central nervous system, peripheral system, and then organ systems. And it's literally a map that is here, and the messages are going down and out and back again, and that's how the communication happens. That's how your body stays healthy and healing, is for these messages to be moving free and clear. And literally we think of it as a fuse box. So if the fuse were to blow in one area, which organ system might be affected in that area? And that's where we're going to start to see loss of function. So I've got these charts here for you. So you can just take one and pass it around. And that's a good reference for you to understand the next part, which is how I'm going to show you when there's an interference. So here's the big idea here is that if the messages get from the brain to the cells and back again without interference, you get to be healthy. But if there's any misalignment that occurs, nerve interference, subluxation, that's interfering with that flow of messages, then we start to see breaking down in the body. And so subluxations, right, when there's a misalignment, that starts to create a little bit of damage to the tissue around it. And that soft tissue damage creates some inflammation. That also leads to nerve irritation. When we have inflammation and nerve irritation, the body wants to protect that area and stop it from moving, because any more movement is going to create more damage. So your smart body will take the muscles around that joint and strap down that joint and stop it from moving to protect you, right? And how crazy is that, that when we get muscle spasms, then what do in our culture? Oh, take a muscle relaxant. Oh yeah, I feel so much better now as I'm doing more and more damage, right? So we have a smart body. How crazy is that, that our body is so smart that it actually creates muscle spasms to protect you when it needs to. When it spasms, that creates joint fixation, meaning that joint stops moving through its full range of motion as it's trying to protect itself. And when the signaling to the brain starts to go that says, this joint is now not moving through its full range of motion, the brain says, that's wrong. That's something wrong there, that it's not moving through its full range of motion, and that creates a stress response. So subluxations are related to creating a stress response in the whole body, because the signaling to the brain is saying something's wrong here, and it triggers stress mode in the brain, which then creates the stress response in the body. And we know when cortisol is running high, it increases inflammation, increases cardiovascular concerns, it keeps us awake, turns off our melatonin, right? All those things that we already talked about. Subluxations actually promote that high cortisol level in the body. Okay. So now, if we look at sleep apnea, right? Okay, anybody that snores? I know you guys, none of you here do, but maybe you know somebody that does, right? Right? So what is actually going on there that amount of noise can come out of a human being when they're asleep and they don't even hear it, right? What's going on with sleep apnea, right? And you're listening to them, and you're listening to that loud snore, there's even a little rhythm to it, and then all of a sudden, it's quiet. It's so quiet, they're not breathing at all. Are they going to take a breath? And then you're waiting for that next breath to think, are they going to take that breath? And then, right, the big snore, and they take that next breath, that gasping breath, right? Chances are this person is suffering from some sleep apnea, if that's what's happening. And literally, it can decrease the whole level of oxygen in your body, and it can interfere with your ability to heal. I mean, there's a lot of things going on there. Now, a lot of these people that snore, they say, well, it's because we got a deviated septum in our family, and it's genetic that we snore. Everybody in our family snores. Okay, I hear that, and certainly genetics can play out, because that has to do with anatomical structure of what you inherit. But don't we notice that it's maybe the number of beers they had during the day, or the amount of pizza or white foods that may intensify it? Now, I know a lot of people, that's exactly what's going on. They can actually minimize or they can exacerbate it based on their lifestyle. So lifestyle will still have an impact on this. It still does, hands down. And I see this over and over again. And people say, no, it's always there. And then you look at their lifestyle. That's because their lifestyle doesn't change. And everybody in their family eats the same way, right? So they say that it's just genetic. But when we get that lifestyle right, we absolutely will see changes with this. So sleep apnea, what happens is there's this pathway here, this air pathway, and there's soft tissue in through here. And so if there isn't a good nerve supply, the integrity of that soft tissue it gets so relaxed that it vibrates when the airflow goes through. And that turbulence is what creates the sound of snoring. It's the turbulence that's moving through those membranes. And the back of the throat can literally close down. Now, if you add inflammation in the body, those tissues literally will swell up. Now that's going to make even more of a narrower passageway, and that's going to make a louder sound as air goes through there. So that's what's happening with snoring and with sleep apnea. And so what are the solutions for sleep apnea? Well, you know, they try the drug thing, but then there's this other thing that medicine has come up with, that whole CPAP machine, right? Beautiful. So yeah. How would you like to be sleeping next to that? Maybe some of you are, right? Maybe some of you are. Is this the only solution? Maybe not. Maybe there are some other solutions that we could consider. So let me show you what I found clinically is the link here. C1 to C3. This is the nerve supply to the whole vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is really strongly involved with our breathing. It's in charge of our diaphragm and all of our organs right down to the large intestine. And it's really important for sleep and for healing. Vagus nerve is in charge of that. So oftentimes I'll find a C1 to C3 subluxation. This is also the nerve that comes out and is in charge of running that whole soft palate area, all of that. And then the C6 to C7 tends to be more about the sinuses. So if the snoring is related to sinus issues and inflammation in the nasopharynx tissues because of sinus concerns, oftentimes this is the subluxation. Chemical stress is a big part of when we find these subluxations. So remember, the things that cause subluxations or stresses, those three T's, traumas, toxins, and thoughts, those are what create subluxations. And so in this case, with sleep apnea, most of the time we're going to find it's a chemical stress that's the dominant habit that needs to be changed so that we can not only correct the subluxations, but you can stop recreating those subluxations. Okay, thoracic outlet syndrome, the middle of the thoracic spine here is where the canal, where the nerve comes through, is the narrowest. So it's the least tolerant of swelling or irritation. So if we have subluxations in this area, then when you lay down to go to sleep, the body naturally is going to want to try and reduce that irritation. And so this is the case where people toss and turn in their sleep, right? Anybody ever had someone that they sleep with or near that are just moving all night long in their sleep, right? Right? Anybody know that, right? Or maybe you hear that noise in the other room. They're tossing and turning all night long. Oftentimes that's because there's something going on in their thoracic spine. And it's just that smart body trying to relieve the irritation by changing the position. I'll tell you what, this is so correctable. And when we adjust these people and these patterns start to actually go into their healthy, normal alignment, people will come back and say, "Doc, I was like Dracula. I was sleeping so deeply last night." Like, their sleep gets so deep because they're not being woken up anymore. And if they also have the psychological stresses along with this piece right here, then the irritation will wake them up, and then their mind starts to go again, and then they're awake because they're thinking. And so it's that kind of combination. And when we remove this and they go into that deep, deep sleep, they're amazed. They didn't know that they could sleep so well. So I love it when I find these cases because we can really help these people so much. And so typically it's going to be that T5 to T9 area, and it's literally a physical subluxation in this area. And so what is it that physically that promotes this? Sedentary lifestyle where you're hunching, right? If you're like in a job where you're sniffing that monitor all day long, right, that kind of thing, that's going to actually be one of the things that will compromise that as well and promote that. Okay, restless leg. Anybody here encountered restless leg or know somebody that does, right? Exactly. So restless leg. Now this is a fascinating one because I want to unpack this for you. I mean, they have a drug for this too. And if you Google this, Google will say this is genetic, right? I think it's just very common, right? And I'm not sure that it's a genetic piece, but it's so common. And again, it could be linked to the common lifestyle of that family. Everybody's doing the same lifestyle practice. So let's look at this here. What is related here? So it tends to be L4 and L5, and then the sacrum. So this is the nerve supply that goes to the bladder, the bowels, reproductive organs, and then right down into the legs. And this is often a neurological component here of what's going on. But it's fascinating to look at this piece. So our muscles have slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers. The slow twitch fibers are actually the pain signals. Pain signals use slow twitch fibers. So if you ever had that experience of, like maybe you touch something hot and when you think back on it, it's like almost slow motion of time where you think, I just touched that hot pan and that's been on the stove and that's hot, right? So it's a little counterintuitive, but the pain fibers will use slow twitch to move the muscles if there's a pain signal happening. And yet, did you ever have the experience of maybe you're sitting in a chair and you're kind of leaning back on the legs here, and all of a sudden it goes off balance, and you were like a ninja, you move so fast to regain your balance and recover. Like you were moving before you even thought about it. So the muscles will actually use that fast twitch to recover fast. Okay? So when we think of what's happening with restless leg, right, there's a twitch thing that happens. There's a jumpiness that happens with it. It's our restless, and it wakes us up, and or interferes with us being able to sleep. And so what we find is that when there is nerve irritation in these areas, there's actually the body wanting to, it's stimulating these twitch fibers so that we start to move the muscle. And we also will see that this idea of, like if you hit your thumb with a hammer, you start to, you move your body. You just instinctively, you do this. Everybody had that experience? You hurt yourself and you're like, ow, 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 right? And what's happening is, as you're moving it back and forth, your brain is actually stimulating your proprioceptive fibers all over the place, and you're actually stimulating the fast twitch fibers, and that actually deflects, or it deviates from the slow twitch, which are the pain fibers. So it actually drops down the pain levels because you're stimulating a different part of the nervous system. So that's one of the things, one of the associations that we found is that restless leg is a neurological component here. And so if we could actually correct this misalignment, these subluxations here, we often see that also changes. Get some great results with people. And then again, they get that deep sleep that they really want. So remember, subluxations, they cause nerve irritation, and it's an interference in your body's innate ability to heal and remain healthy. It's interfering with your body's ability to be healthy and healing. Subluxation. Then you can see, if we have the alignment of the vertebrae, and here comes, for example, a disc that is protruding out, it's literally pushing against the spinal cord or the nerve root that comes out, and that nerve root is continuing out to affect some part of the body. We want to have in our spine is our lifeline, our spine is our suit of armor. We actually want to have a healthy forward curve here. So if you've lost the alignment and you're subluxated, over time that actually leads to deterioration in the joint, and that degenerative change that can then cause a lot of problem, because it can start to actually affect the nervous system in ways that become harder and harder to correct. So degenerative changes in the spine are the result of long-standing misalignment, subluxation patterns that have deteriorated and degenerated. So what is it that causes subluxations? It's bad habits. It's life, it's the traumas, but then it's also our bad habits that are the micro-traumas and the micro-stresses that are ongoing. So a car accident might be a cause of a subluxation, but poor posture when we're driving could be another part of what promotes that subluxation. Check out these common postures, like stress, looking down, but not stressed, but still looking down. This is the common posture our tribe has taken on, and this is causing a lot of problems in our spine and promoting subluxation patterns. This is part of this unnaturally unhealthy world that we're living in today, is that we've got these postures. So when you've got your phone and you are in the habit of, checking your phone, I want you to change your habit to this. At least do that. At least bring it upright, right, so that your spine's upright. Really start to pay attention to what your spine is doing as you are going through all of your postures. And again, it's all of those postures together. It's the chemical stress, the emotional stress, the mental stress, and the physical stresses. And everything accumulates. That's the key thing here. And so as we have this optimum posture, we can see this head, this bowling ball on the top of the spine, when it's right over the center of gravity and we've got good curves in the spine, healthy curves in the spine, then this 12-pound head is being carried with enough energy to work with 12 pounds of weight. As soon as the head starts to go forward, it now doubles. 1 inch forward doubles the amount of work that the body has to do. If you take a bowling ball and hold it here, that same bowling ball, you hold it out here, you got to work harder and harder. It's the same weight, you're working harder. So we know that as the posture deteriorates, it increases the stress that the body has to work with, And now we've got 42 pounds of work that's happening. So all these muscles are all attached to the skull, and they're just holding on for dear life and creating a lot of stress through this whole area. We literally have research that shows that the further out in front the head is, it literally can take years off your life because of the pressure that it puts on the brainstem and the spinal cord right in this area. So this is, you know, time and gravity are not on your side when posture starts to deteriorate. So we really need to pay attention to this. This is one of the signs of subluxations. And it's what the modern person is turning into. We're seeing this. This used to be an old person's posture. We are seeing it in our teens. We're seeing it. And, you know, I watch very carefully toddlers. So if you see a toddler that's just figuring out how to be upright, their head is so big that if they don't have it right over their center of gravity, they're going to fall right over, right? So when you look at toddlers, they've got that perfect posture. And I like to watch nowadays, how fast are they losing that? I'm seeing 4-year-olds that are starting to get into this. 4-year-olds. That's worrying me, because this we think of as an old person's posture. Guess what direction that kid is heading? If at 4 years old, it's not even controlling the head properly, right? It's a big problem, and we have to pay attention to it. So how do we correct subluxations? Adjustments in rhythm is the important thing here. And, you know, healing happens in a rhythm, sleep rhythms, healing rhythms. So we want to get into a rhythm of adjustments because the adjustments are cumulative. They build from one adjustment to the next as the system is getting healthier and healthier and healthier. The same way that if we don't take care of our posture, it's cumulative as well, and it's taking us down a path, right? It's like sick people that are sick tend to get sicker and sicker. Healthy, robust people get healthier and healthier, right? If you've got a lot of wealth, you can build more and more wealth. If you've got debt, what happens to that debt? You grow more and more debt, right? Same thing. So adjustments in a rhythm is where we get our best results. That's how I can do my best work with people, is we just have that rhythm set, and each time you come in, we're building on it. But we also have to break the bad habits that keep recreating the subluxations. So when we talk about the bad habits around sleep, right? Good sleep hygiene, eating the right foods and getting the right supplements in, moving our bodies, that's part of the habit, right? So that we are exerting our bodies so we really get exhausted physically. And then how we think is one of the bad habits. So using the EFT for how you think. And then exercise to strengthen your suit of armor, to strengthen your spine, to keep it healthy so you hold your adjustments longer. And it's this combination which is so important. So both fitness and core strength is important, but also very specific exercises to strengthen those muscles of the spine. And those are given on an individual basis based on what's showing up in that person. So how do you know if you have subluxations? We use 5 criteria to evaluate that. First is instrumentation. So when we do our scans on your nervous system, that's one of the ways that we're going to pick up where this nerve interference is. It helps us pick up where inflammation is, where the muscles are asymmetrically pulling on the spine, how adaptable you are with the heart rate variability. So instrumentation is a wonderful tool for us to use because it tells us about all those parts of the nervous system that you can't feel, right? You can tell us where it hurts, but you can't tell us where the subluxations are that are affecting function without symptoms associated with them. So instrumentation is key there. Then we actually look at the ranges of motion. Remember, when the joints are moving through a full range of healthy motion, the signaling to the brain is this is a healthy unit. If we lose that range of motion, that signaling is that this is a stressed unit and now the cortisol levels go up. So we literally measure the motion in each of the joints. We do static palpation just to feel, is there swelling in this area? Is there edema and inflammation? Is this vertebra stuck in the wrong position? So static palpation is another criteria. I'll go to this last one. We use x-rays sometimes can actually show us the actual loss of alignment, shows us the degenerative changes, where those old chronic subluxations are. And then we use visualization as well. So visualization is where we're literally looking at the outermost manifestation of what's happening right at the core, right in the spine, the spinal cord itself. So can I get a volunteer to come up so we can demonstrate this whole idea of the visualization? Would a volunteer come up? Anybody?
Go ahead, Liz.
Come on up, Liz. All right. So Liz is just going to stand, you're going to stand facing this way to start with, right? And so those of you, especially that are exactly right behind her, we're going to look at posture here. And so you tell me, Do we see one shoulder higher than the other? What do you see?
Yeah.
Yep, slightly on this side, a little
Yeah.
bit higher. I'll tell you that when I first started to work with Liz, it was much more dramatic. So this is actually really not bad what we're seeing here. All right, if we look at, let's have you turn to the side. Remember we looked at that alignment piece, right? So we're looking at where the center of the head is. Yep, so her brain's finding it, so she knows about that. But we do have a little bit of this, so this is, again, is a piece that we're working with her. And again, when she first started, especially when she was in her work life, that's right, it was really far forward. So these are some of the key pieces that we like to look at.
10 years,
Posture.
you're still working on it.
I know. Because, why? Why is that? Because our world is unnaturally unhealthy. So, you know, could you ever get your spine so fit that you'd never have to take care of it again?
No.
Could you ever exercise and get so fit that you never have to exercise again, right? Wrong question, right? So we need to be taking care of our spines because our world is unnaturally unhealthy, right? Thank you so much for helping us to demonstrate that. So for those of you that are curious whether you have subluxations that are related to, that could be affecting your health, a lot of you are patients here. For those of you that are not current patients, I would like to invite you to come and we can actually, if you'd like, we can do one of those posture analysis. We do a digital posture analysis. We can actually do that right now to get just a quick check. And then if you're interested and you want to come in for a full evaluation, the usual cost of that is $210. For people that come to these classes, I'd like to give some incentive to take action, and so we cap that at $47. So if you want to get checked more closely or get rechecked, if you haven't been in the practice for a while, then you're welcome to do that as well. So, can't sleep, get adjusted, and sleep well, meaning get your well sleep habits down. And that combination is what's going to then add years to your life, because we know how important it is to take care of our sleep. So thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. All right. And we do have a recording of this, I believe. So, oh yeah, so you can go to sugar drop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Use your glasses. And if any of you have any